Hello everyone, it's Sylvia from Feel Like Tarot. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm very excited because I have just received a delivery and it's one of my, let's say, my most sought after tarot deck. I have been searching for this deck for quite some time. Let's be honest, probably the better part of 10 years. And it's finally here. So as you can imagine, it's a hard to find deck, obviously. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so difficult to procure. But it's funny because it's not an indie deck. It's not an indie deck. It's one of those unicorns indeed. It is a mass market deck, but it's such an amazing deck for many reasons. That what happened was that it went out of print and then a different publisher picked it up and they butchered it. So they did an awful job in the reprinting. And so what happened was that, of course, it was very difficult to get basically the rights to print it again from the original publisher. So that never happened, even though the entire tarot community, I believe everyone agrees that the first printing was so much better. And then, you know, as things goes in these cases, if you do find the original copy from the first publisher, it will be very expensive. And needless to say, it's also really hard to find because, you know, time flies and there's less and less copies available. So I had almost given up on this one, but it's here. It's here. And I had to open it first because I spoke to the person who very graciously accepted to sell it to me for a very reasonable price. It's not in perfect conditions, definitely not in mint, not even near new, not excellent. The cards are in excellent conditions, but the box is pretty banged up. In any case, it's here and it is, ta-da! Okay, this is the Gaian Tarot. I know that it's a deck, you know, everyone pretty much agrees on the production value of the Llewellyn publication. So this is indeed the Llewellyn publication. It is back from 2011. So in 2011, Llewellyn published this deck. And then after a few years, I think it went out of print fast, and then it was taken by Schaefer, and Schaefer did an absolute, you know, botched job out of print, reprinting this deck. So as you can see, the box is, as I knew that it would have been a bit banged up like that, so I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm not here for the box, I'm here for the tarot. The book, I'm not entirely sure whether the book is the same or if Schaefer has applied a few changes on it as well. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you the original deck first, and then I'm going to do a quick comparison with the latest publication, just to show you the differences. Ironically though, because I really couldn't stand the recent publication, the one by Schaefer, I did a deck modification on that deck, a pretty heavy one, to make it look as much as possible as the original Llewellyn publication. So I'm not able to show you the before and after of the deck modification, which is a pity. But we'll talk about it later. So I just wanted to show you this. The reasons why this is a coveted deck as opposed to the other edition is because the finish of the cardstock is actually matte, as you can see. And because it doesn't have the ugly white blue borders on top of the white ones. And well, basically also there's a slight difference when it comes to the font of the titles. And that's pretty much it. I mean, obviously we could compare the cardstock. I'm not, you know, it's a really fine, it's a fine cardstock. It's not my favorite. It's not being mid-mass market, it's not like the US games decks from the 80s. We're not talking about that kind of battery feel to it. However, it is a durable one. I mean, after all, this deck was published in 2011, and it has not been used much, I know that, but at least for the little that it has been used, you couldn't tell, because the cardstock is perfectly fine, and I don't see any damage. I don't see any chipping on the edges. So I'm quite happy that, you know, I can find it in this near mint, let's say, conditions, at least when it comes to the cards. As I said, we'll have a look later at the guidebook, because I have the feeling that it's not, that they did some changes on the guidebook as well. But let's have a look at the deck. So if you're not familiar with this deck, it is an absolute joy of a deck. It's so beautiful. This is by Joanna Powell Colbert, which is also the author of the Herb Crafter's Tarot. That is also mass market, but it's a lot easier to procure. And I believe that it might be still published by Llewellyn, but I'm not entirely sure. In any case, it's a lot easier to find the Herb Crafter's Tarot rather than the Gaian Tarot, especially the Llewellyn edition. Just to give you an idea, this deck, the Llewellyn publication, could sell for anything from, let's say, $100 Australian to $250, $300 Australian. So it is one of those really sought after decks. And, you know, when you have the first look at the cards, you understand why. Because it's such a beautiful deck. It's not just beautiful because of the artwork, because of the subject portrayed on the card, but because it's just a fantastic view of the tarot, this as a system, you know, itself. And all of the cards, you know, when we look, for example, at the way in which some of the majors have been renamed, we have the Devil card, which is actually called Bindweed. So it's beautiful because it shows you one of the aspects of the Devil card. And you know, there's a lot of debates in the tarot community whether we like or not a card that has been reimagined in such a way that it gives us only one aspect of the meaning of that particular card. Personally, I think that there's room for everyone's interpretation, and I like it when it's, yes, perhaps it's just one of the aspects of the Devil card, absolutely. However, it is a very strong aspect of the Devil card, and not just that, it just gives me an idea of what the author was thinking about when they started reproducing this card, and also it gives me a very specific vibe that is something that I can find throughout the whole deck. So I'm okay with that. Lightning for the Tower, I'm perfectly fine with that. You know, and not all of the cards have been renamed. As you can see, we got the Star, the Moon, the Sun, Awakening for Judgment, and Gaia, you know, Gaia the World for the World card, which is absolutely fine. And then we got the minors are actually very elemental. So we've got Fire for the Wands. And I love that there's so much alchemy. If you know your alchemy, you know what I mean. There's that kind of vibe that you can really find in the cards as well. I would say that this is an excellent deck for beginners. Very not so expensive, unfortunately, but you can find the Schaefer edition mass market on Amazon for a reasonable price as well. So, you know, it's not that you have to have this edition. It's just this edition is a collectible item because of the differences between this edition and the most recent mass market one. So this is the Suit of Water. But you can definitely, if you want to have a starter kind of tarot deck, you can definitely start with this one in the most recent mass market edition. The court cards have been renamed as well, as you can tell. So we got the Child, the Water instead of the Page, we got the Explorer instead of the Knight, and the Guardian instead of the Queen, and the Elder instead of the King. And I would say those make perfect sense to me. And there's also a lot of consistency. So if they have renamed the court cards in one suit, all of the court cards in the other suits are renamed the same way. Believe you me, there's actually, I know that it sounds obvious, but believe you me, there's actually decks that made a mess, complete mess of renaming the core cards, different names for different core cards in different suits. And it didn't make sense. It wasn't something that was related to archetypes, for example, which I would actually appreciate. No, it was just a random renaming of of the core cards. Anyway, this is the suit of Earth. As I said, very alchemical. Very balanced though, I have to say. So each and every suit has got the same weight on the deck. Sometimes you may have an alchemical or an alchemical feel to a deck, but perhaps the suit of Wands is predominant, or the suit of Water, depending on the vibes that you receive from the deck. But this one is very balanced, I have to say, absolutely. So what I'm going to do, I have the other mass market edition, which is by, as I said, Schiffer. Sorry, I keep on saying Schaefer. I don't know why, it's actually Schiffer. And so when it comes to the box, I have to say I actually prefer this version, so the latest one, because it's, you know, like it opens up like a book. It's got a ribbon, it's got a magnetic closure. It's very sturdy, like the hardcover of a book, for example, as opposed to, you know, the flimsy ones that we've seen broke down pretty easily, you know, from the original Llewellyn publication. However, when it comes to everything else, I am not a fan of this edition. Now, as I said, I can't really show you what the cards looked like or used to look like before I did the modification, because I trimmed it. I think I did a fairly decent job in the trimming. So one of the differences is also related to the fact that this is actually gloss. It's got a gloss finish. Now, if I take these two cards just to compare the two, first of all, we'll see the difference in size. So on the one hand, you know, it's always best to have a bigger picture. Fair enough, you can see more details. But when it just so happens that this deck is already slightly wider than the standard tarot size, this one ended up being even wider. And if you can imagine blue borders on top of the white ones, and I actually trimmed down the white ones as well. So this deck was, and I kid you not, just this big. Imagine, it was just as big as my hand. Very, very unpractical, very difficult to shuffle. Also because they are quite glossy, so of course the cards were just gluing, tend to stick together. The only advantage that I see out of this deck indeed is the fact that when you have a gloss finish, colors tend to pop a little bit more. And also because it's a slightly bigger, let's say, thumbprint on the card itself, you obviously see more details in the bigger version. But that's about it, because even when it comes to the font and the color of the key of the titles, I actually do prefer this one. It is slightly smaller, but it's more pleasing, at least aesthetically. And this is an excellent deck as well. There's a number of things, as I said, they have just, you know, adjusted that. They haven't changed any of the images. So of course, if you have this deck, you pretty much have the original one, except for those technical details we talked about. And I don't know, I just feel that it's just a lot better to have the original one, especially if you have an Instagram account or YouTube channel and you're taking a lot of photos. You know, having something that catches the light every time you move around or you move the cards, you take a photo right from the top, you're obviously seeing your reflection on the cards, which is not always very, let's say, it's aesthetically a bit of an issue. But obviously, you know, it depends on you. It's if you prefer the colors to pop up, then this one is definitely your preferred edition. So let's have a quick look at the two books, because I believe this is the original one, this is the latest one. I believe this one is thicker, but I don't know whether it's because it's got more pages or because the pages are thicker themselves. So let's have a look at how many pages there are in this guidebook. So 206, 271, 72, but these ones are about other decks. So let's say 270. This one has got 183, including the bibliography. So obviously we got almost 100 more pages. And let's look at the difference in font. Okay, this one is a larger font, slightly larger font. So obviously there might be a bit of a difference in the number of pages because of that. So what we're going to do, just to make sure 100% that we are looking at the differences here, I'm just going to pull a card. So we got the Elder of Fire, which is the King of Fire, King of Wands. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look first at the older Llewellyn edition, and then we're going to compare it to the newer one just to make sure that we know what we're looking at. So okay, so we got all the major arcanas here and minor arcanas, water, earth. Okay, so they group them up by numbers, which I like. And then obviously you got all of the children, all of the explorers, all of the guardians, and we get to the elders here. So you got a bit of description of the elders. So what is, let's say, the main meaning of all of the kings in general. So that's interesting. We got the elder. We start with the elder of air, and then we proceed to fire. So there we go. A curandera. So the curandera is a Latin American term for a healer, and it's a person that is definitely in touch with Mother Nature. They know everything there is to know about plants and how to use them in order to heal. Funnily enough, I actually recognize the curandera as the Queen of Earth, not as the Queen of Fire, because as an archetype for me, the Queen of Fire is the performer. But it's interesting. Let's see what the description is. Squats on the earth in front of an altar honoring the ancestors during Los Días de los Muertos, the days of the dead. She holds a handful of burning herbs that direct waves of energy to dissipate the foul and bring in the sweet. She lives in La Época del Mito, the time of myth, the other world, as much or more than she does in the world of consensual reality. She lives in the Matrix, basically. Her gaze directed to the viewer is potent and challenging. She reminds us to open up to the other world, the world of energy patterns, spirits, and invisibles. When we shift our inner reality, our outer reality shifts as well. Ally is Iguana. Where is the iguana? There it is. Who brings the medicine of the dream time. And then we got when you get this card in a reading. Then we got when you read the shadow side of this card, so obviously the reverse meaning. And we've got an affirmation. Let's have a look at the more modern, the most recent one of the Elder of Water, Elder of Fire. So, okay, so we got the Elder of Fire. It still does group them by, let's say, numerologically. And we still do have a little bit of a description of the kings, although it looks to me like it's slightly shorter. But when it comes to the actual description of the card, we've got the Elder of Fire. The description here is the same. When you get this card in a reading, when you read the shadow side of the card in the affirmation, it's exactly the same. So I wonder perhaps there's something different when it comes to spreads and description of the cards and the structure of tarot, because let's see, at the beginning, the content, introduction to the tarot, then we got the major arcana, then we got the minors, and then working with the cards and bibliography. I think there's also a few spreads. Yes, there's a few spreads as well. And in here, if we look at the content, we've got obviously the major arcana preface, so probably the introduction is a bit shorter, much shorter, 2 pages instead of probably 30 or 40. So then we got the major arcana, the minor arcana, working with the cards and endnotes. So I'm guessing there's also, yeah, there's spreads as well. Fair enough. I mean, I don't see that many differences, to be honest, when it comes to the guidebook. As I said, the font in the more recent one is smaller, so you would expect it to have less pages. In any case, what I mean with this is that, you know, you can have a passion for a deck, you can love the deck, you can work with the deck, and you know, when you're a collector, sometimes you also want the originals. It's almost the same thing you can say for a book collector. Now, if you know any book collector, you would know that first editions are sometimes invaluable, or in any case are valued a lot more than the more recent editions. And there's many reasons. There's also, you know, that sense of having a piece of history in your collection, depending on when the publication was done. But in this case, it's because it is widely recognized that this deck has been, you know, it was easier to use. It's a much more practical kind of deck. This one isn't, because please don't forget that it did come with the really large, wide blue borders. If you are not familiar with that, I invite you to just do a little bit of research online and look at the images, and you will see the really wide blue borders, and even the white one were wider than this one. And then, you know, it's just about details, obviously, the font on the cards, the font on the books. I mean, that is really dependent on you. But when it comes to having a deck, this by itself, it's an excellent deck. It's an absolutely excellent deck. As I said before, I highly recommend it for beginners because, you know, especially for the minors, you will have a very clear visualization of the meaning of the card. You don't find the traditional symbols of the RWS, or perhaps you do in some cases, most of the times you don't. But you do find a, let's say, a better way, a more direct way, less subtle way to depict the essence of the cards themselves. So I'm really happy that I have this version as well. As a collector, it really made me happy to be able to find it. And at the same time, because, you know, this one was, let's say, a deck that I purchased from this person, she also had another deck for sale, and it was a deck that I have been, let's say, it was readily available mass market, so I could have got it out of Amazon, but something happened, and about a year and a half ago, that made this deck jump up in price. And for several reasons, I didn't want to buy into the markup. And you'll understand when you see the deck. So it's the Everyday Enchantment Tarot by Poppy Pelling. If you don't know what happened, I encourage you to familiarize with what happened to Poppy. A wonderful soul who is unfortunately no longer with us. The author of more than one deck, there's a few that she produced, fantastic guidebooks every time. It's just mind-blowing the way she was a natural storyteller, let's put it this way, but also a fantastic artist, and the way in which she can channel the meaning and the essence of the cards into her artwork was nothing short of sublime. I have always known that, and yet for some reason I never reached for this deck when it was selling for perhaps about 35 Australian dollars. Then when Poppy passed away, it jumped up to $80, and it never went back since then. I felt like, and it might not be the case, so that's my opinion, and I may be completely wrong, but it felt almost as if the publisher was taking advantage of the fact that Poppy wasn't with us anymore. So I just didn't want to buy into that. It might just have been me being stubborn. But I wanted this deck, I really did, and I find it for an excellent price now, so I'm quite happy. Now this is published by Red Feather, which is also a Schiffer publication. So it opens up like a music box, really. So as you're probably very familiar with this deck because you can see it everywhere. There is so much life in the cards. It is, knowing what happened is so sad, because every time that I look at this deck, even more now that I have it in my hands, and I can assure you 100%, if you don't have this deck, you don't know it. I did not know it. You can watch a walkthrough, you can have your own idea, but you need to have this deck in your hands, you know, to be able to feel how much life there is in these cards. Now this one is a quite, let's say, famous deck in the sense that it has been modified by a lot of people because it comes with rather large borders as well. So this one has not been modified, and to be honest with you, I'm not going to. I was really tempted, but I'm not going to. I have seen the result of the modification, so many people leave the title at the bottom, but they just remove the top and side borders. That could be an idea, but to be honest with you, I'm not going to touch it. I'm just going to leave it this way. And funnily enough, because there will be a lot of people saying it was the way Poppy intended. No, actually, I have heard, because I was following Poppy, she had a YouTube channel. She used to talk about her decks all the time. One thing that she said many times was that this was not intended to have borders. I believe it's called the bleeding area. So basically, when you're going to make playing cards, that's a very concrete example, and you want to make your own deck, they will show you a dotted line around the image telling you that, you know, that's where the cut is going to be. So obviously, if you want your image to be full, you will have to reduce the side and account for the dotted line. If you don't do that, there will be a part that will be cut off, basically. Poppy wasn't familiar 100% with how this works. And so that's what happened. She probably overdid it. I don't necessarily know what happened afterwards. But she said several times. She said several times that she did not mean for this deck to have borders. She never got to the point of reprint, you know, of doing a second print, perhaps. I don't know whether she wanted to or not. Perhaps she could have been happy with the result. I know a lot of people, as I said, trim them off. I'm just going to keep them on. Or maybe one day I will trim them off. I don't know. In any case, this is the deck. It is very beautiful, very modern. Poppy used to live in England. So I used to live in London, and I recognize a lot of, for example, the road signs and stuff like that. So it's nice to be able to recognize a deck or the features or the landmarks in a deck when it is so modern, because it does carry an additional layer of meanings for me. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that you will see most of the time this deck is fantastic when it comes to diversity, even when it comes to not just body sizes, skin tones, but also when it comes to ability. So in this case, we see a disabled person. Most of the time, when you have a person on a wheelchair, you will see them in the Chariot card, which in a way I believe it makes sense. However, having had experience with someone in a wheelchair for decades, my mom, I can assure you 1000% that unfortunately the barriers are everywhere, and they are so infuriating that you definitely do not have the feel of the Chariot if you're in a wheelchair or if you care for someone in a wheelchair. Of course, it depends on where you live, but I can assure you 1000% that even where we used to live, there was a bit of an evolution throughout the years, but it's never enough. Never enough. The architectural barriers are just confining someone who's in a wheelchair even more than what they need to be confined. So I never agreed with portraying someone in a wheelchair on the Chariot, because that doesn't correspond to reality. You don't have the sense of overcoming obstacles of the chariot if you're in a wheelchair or if you care for someone in a wheelchair. All you see are barriers everywhere. What I do agree with is representing this as the strength card, because it's absolutely wonderful. It's the way in which there is this sense of overcoming the barrier itself. Were it the chariot, had it been the chariot, it would have felt almost as if you were given. You're in the chariot, so you're overcoming barriers because there are no barriers anymore for you. No, there are barriers, and then some. And I feel that the strength is more representative of the power of someone on a wheelchair that overcomes the obstacles because they want to live, you know, like anyone else's. And that was wonderful, and that shows and feels a lot more the same feeling that I had whenever we could do things with my mom, because we could go for a walk, we could, because we finally found a long stretch of the road that didn't have any bumps or potholes or stuff like that. So that is a feeling of the strength, because you're confirming what you had, where there were doubts, you're actually confirming your strength. So love it for the strength card. Of course, there are different people with different experiences. Mine were always negative, that it was just horrible. And my mom passed away, granted she passed away many years ago, actually almost 20 years ago. So of course we're talking about something completely different now, and I am aware there's a lot of improvements, absolutely, but I still see, whenever I go to a supermarket, I still see that there's not enough disabled parking spots, or they're not close enough to the shops themselves, or for whatever reason there's still barriers there. Perhaps they have them but they forgot to level out the let's say from the street onto the walking path, and so you still have to, it's still a barrier, because guess what, it's not that easy to just go on top of one step. When there's more than one, it's practically impossible on a wheelchair. So anyway, rant over. Sorry about that. It's just that I had to fight for my mom so many times, and I got so upset so many times. Writing letters to the council didn't make any difference. So it's just frustrating. Anyway, as I was saying, there's so much intention in these cards that you will definitely understand the meaning of the cards, even if you're not that familiar with tarot. And in a way, this is just as good as a beginner's deck as the Gaian Tarot is, because there is so much intention, and because there is a very successful way to represent the meanings on the cards themselves. I think that there's only one, I think in the Suit of Air, the Suit of Air is called, it's actually called Blades, I believe, in this deck. So we got the Queen of Wands. See this, she's a performer, she's a winning performer, fantastic. This fire energy, love it, absolutely love it. The Suit of Cups is so gorgeous. I love each and every one of these. It's just really, really amazing. And let's see if I can go to Blades. Yes, it's called Blades. So I believe this is Poppy, when her partner passed away. Poppy used to be in a band, guys. If you don't know Poppy, please familiarize yourself. She was a force of nature. She was absolutely wonderful. Let me see, because there is one that I said, no, I don't necessarily agree with that. There you go. So you've got these two cards. You've got the Queen of Blades and you got the King of Blades. So the Queen of Swords, the Queen of Air, and the King of Air. And I believe that it's the other way around. So I believe that because the Queen of Air has reached she's mastering her thoughts and the weight of her thoughts onto her own structure, on her own body, her own mind, her own heart, so also her feelings. But because she's mastering that, she's also the person that doesn't accept any bullshit. Excuse my French. So the reason why she doesn't accept any BS is because she has been through so much, through, you know, the journey throughout the minor arcana, in the suit of blades and swords, that she doesn't have time for this BS. She doesn't have time for that. And so she sees through that, and then she will cut you short. If you're trying to, you know, manipulate her, you can't do that. It's not possible to manipulate her. So no BS. She always sees everything with a very clear mind. She is the judge in this case because she sees through everything, and she's also extremely impartial because she has been through all of this. On the other hand, the King of Swords to me is the expert, so the scientist and the experts, because he has reached that level of no BS, etc. But he's also decided to give back into the world the way in which he has mastered his thoughts. And so he becomes the expert, he becomes the scientist in this case, or, you know, even not really the surgeon, but the researcher. So this is the only thing that I would see, you know, they are kind of swapped, but that's the only thing. About every other card, I reckon it's absolutely really well expressed, really well explained. Even this one, this is the 5 of coins. Now traditionally we will have the point of view of the people left outside, because there will be, you know, exiled, left outside in the cold, etc. That's the sense of the 5 of coins. Whereas in this case, you actually see what's happening inside. You can still see the people that has been closed off, but the point of view is of a person that is actually looking at 2 different levels. So the first close-up is of a person winning at the jackpot machine with a happy dog, definitely a happy expression in the face, and someone else, you know, lost outside, closed off, and banned, or whatever has happened. So that's a very interesting perspective, but I still see the meaning of the card. So I would say each and every one of these cards is absolutely fantastic when you want to have a modern interpretation of the traditional way of reading RWS. So this one, as I said, and came today, so I'm quite happy about these 2 decks. In equal measure, I have to say, in equal measure, because I got this one not trimmed, secondhand but not trimmed, for an excellent price. And I got the Gaian Tarot, the original Llewellyn publication, for an excellent price as well. So that was a really, really good find. So this is one of my unicorn decks, and you know, I can tick it off the list. Now, it's still a very long list, so I'm nowhere near the bottom. But let me know in the comments below, for example, if you have a unicorn deck, so a really sought after deck that, you know, it's so rare that it's like a unicorn, but you really would love to find it. Let me know, because I really appreciate, I really like, it makes me happy when I can find a deck that is a unicorn deck for someone else. So I actually try and facilitate these kind of trades, for example, or transactions. So if you have a unicorn deck that you really want and you can't find it because it's super difficult to find, just let me know in the comments below and I'll see what I can do, because I've got a pretty extensive network in Australia. I'm part of a group where there's at least 3,000-4,000 people, and then, you know, there's others in Europe and UK and the US. You never know, you never know. If you don't ask, you never find it, so you might as well ask. But that was it for today, so thank you so much for staying with me till the end of this video. More to come. Have a great day.